All right, here we go. Welcome to the recruiting show once again. Andrew Bone here talking about the past weekend. It was a big weekend down in Tuscaloosa with the Champions Cookout, the second Champions Cookout of the year. It was pretty busy down in Tuscaloosa. A lot of different schools had different events this past weekend. So it's kind of difficult for a lot of kids to get to a lot of these places. But we saw a lot of a lot of top kids kind of visiting throughout the country, and it seemed like every single school throughout the country had a barbecue, had some sort of barbecue or cookout or something like that. In Alabama, has the Champions Cookout. It was their second one of the summer. They had one back in June, and the majority of top Alabama targets were at that first one back in June. Now they had some top kids that were on campus this month. And, we'll get into that here in a second. But now it's, right now Alabama's just kind of focused on, getting to the start of fall practice. And, that's going to start up here in a few days. And then, once the season starts. And I just actually posted on the Bama Insider board that Alabama's actually going to be able to have some recruits at the first game down in Orlando against Louisville. No contacts able to be made with these recruits. Now we've seen top recruits come to a lot of these opening games that Alabama's had at these neutral site events, like out in Dallas and in Atlanta. We've seen a lot of top kids go to these events, but no contact is allowed between the recruits and the coaches. But they are allowed to give them tickets. So we're going to see probably some top kids from, I would imagine, Florida down at the game in Orlando. I'd imagine guys like Trey Sanders, the number one running back in the country, Evan Neal, one of the biggest offensive linemen in the country at 6'7", 6'8", about 350 pounds. Both those guys at IMG Academy. I would imagine we'll see both those kids at the game. Kind of going back to the weekend down in Tuscaloosa. They had the number one offensive tackle in the country, Darnell Wright, in town. Big visit for him because it was a second trip down to Tuscaloosa, and second trip down to Tuscaloosa this year. He was back at Alabama for the 8A game, and then came back for the camp here, the cookout. He had a really good trip. Was able to talk to a few people pretty close to him, and it seems like everything's going extremely well with Alabama right now. He's not in a rush to make a decision. I think he's going to wait and decide, a little bit later on. Probably, I would imagine we'll see a decision from him maybe in December. Does that mean he's going to decide in December? No, I think he could decide a little bit sooner before that. But I think Alabama's in real good shape with him right now. There's some schools that are very high on his list. Tennessee, Ohio State. He's going to take some other visits. I imagine he'll take all 5 of his official visits before making that decision. But I think Alabama put themselves in very good position. His mom came on the trip with him. It was his mom's first trip to Tuscaloosa. So I think she felt very comfortable with everything, and getting a chance to see the academic side of things is always a big plus. So I would imagine we'll see Darnell and his mom back in Tuscaloosa a few more times before he makes that decision. And somebody's asked me about Rondell Robinson. And I know a lot of people are excited about him. One of the top athletes in the entire country out of Kentucky. We saw Alabama extend him an offer last month at the Tides camp, and Alabama expected to have a very small wide receiver class. They already have a commitment from John Mechie out of New Jersey. Actually from Canada, moved from Canada to Maryland a couple of years ago, but then transferred to a prep school in New Jersey for his senior year. Alabama very high on him, John Mechie, and now Rondell Robinson, a little bit shorter. Mechie is about 6 feet tall, 6'1". Rondell's probably about 5'9". If he stands on his tippy toes, maybe about 5'10", but just a very electric football player. We got a chance to see him at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge a few weeks ago, and man, he was very dominant. I mean, just a hard man to cover in open space, and I think that Alabama just has moved him very high on their recruiting board. And like I said, Alabama only plans on signing about 2 wide receivers in this class, and they would gladly accept his commitment. So I think he's going to wait a little while. I talked to him just the other day, right after that trip to Alabama, and he said he wants to wait until late September, maybe early October, before he makes a decision. Now, he's already taken a couple official visits. He's already visited Purdue and Michigan. A lot of people think Michigan may be the team to beat for him, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think Alabama is in the driver's seat after this past weekend. His whole family came down with him on the trip. He told me that it was his dad's favorite visit of all the trips that they've been on. And with Alabama making him such a top priority, and his relationship with Alabama wide receivers coach Josh Gaddis, I think that has really helped a lot. Josh Gaddis has been talking to him just about every single day. So I think Alabama's in good shape with him. We'll see if he makes a decision a little bit sooner. But as of right now, he's going to take an official visit to Alabama September the 22nd. He also has a visit to Nebraska on September the 1st. So he wants to take both those visits, then make a decision. So we may be late September, early October before we see that decision. A couple other guys who made it down to Tuscaloosa this past weekend that kind of some interesting guys. Darion Downcourt, a 4-star offensive guard from Baltimore. We really hadn't talked about him a lot on the BamaInsider.com board. We keep talking about guys like Clay Webb and Evan Neal, and also Darnell Wright. Those have kind of been the main guys that we've talked about as offensive line targets outside of the guys who are currently committed. Darion Downcourt comes into Tuscaloosa, and we've learned that he has become one of Alabama's top offensive line targets because Alabama really likes him as a center. Now, Clay Webb, who's been recruited by Alabama for a long time, a lot of people see him as a center in college. Clay's never really played center. He started working out at center in the spring. He worked at center at a few camps, but he really wants to play guard. That's the position that he's kind of accustomed to. Now he plays tackle for his high school team, but really likes playing guard as well. So I think that's the position he's going to play in college, at least to begin his career. Now, we've seen guys transition from guard to center a couple years down the road. We've seen that, especially in Tuscaloosa. We saw Barrett Jones do that. Ross Pierschbacher is doing that. Maybe Clay does that down the road, but as of right now, he wants to play guard. So I think Alabama is kind of focused on trying to find a true center in this class. They really like Darion Downcourt. He's certainly a guy that has become one of Alabama's top targets at the position. His teammate, Shane Lee, an Alabama commitment, rivals 100 linebacker. So he's going to have Shane Lee recruiting him just about every day. I spoke to Darion the other day. He told me that as of right now, he doesn't have any overall leaders, but Alabama and Ohio State showing him the most interest. So we're going to keep a pretty close eye on him over the course of the next few months, see what goes on with him. But I would imagine a decision is going to come I would say within the next 2 or 3 months, and it could happen sooner than that. Another center that was there, Kumar Bell. And we saw Kumar Bell get an offer from Alabama in the spring, but then he needed to come to camp and kind of showcase himself at camp. He did that last month, did really well. Alabama's keeping a very close eye on him. They really like him a lot. And I think they're going to wait and see kind of what happens with Darion Downcourt and maybe even some of these other offensive linemen before making a decision. But they really like Kumar Bell a lot, so that's a name to always kind of keep an eye on. Another guy that kind of surprised me a little bit in terms of making a trip up to Tuscaloosa and kind of knowing a little bit about what I know now on this kid, Jaquez Sorrells. He's a 6'3", about 280-pound defensive tackle out of Largo High School down in Florida. Made a trip up to Tuscaloosa on Saturday. Alabama's still looking for some more defensive line help, and he's a kid that they really like a lot. That they would accept a commitment from. So that's a new name that we're talking about now on the Bama Insider board. And if you haven't read our insider, or my insider report on the BamaInsider.com recruiting board, I encourage you to do that. We've got a lot of really good nuggets in there, kind of breaking down every single top recruit that's still left out there for Alabama, even guys that didn't even visit Tuscaloosa this past weekend. So if you have a specific question, all that information is on the BamaInsider.com recruiting board. So I encourage you to go look at that. Another top kid that was on campus that we've talked about a lot on Bama Insider, a lot of people have asked me about him, Christian Harris, 4-star linebacker out of Louisiana, out of Baton Rouge. We saw him make a top 4 list a few weeks ago with Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, and Texas A&M. He's certainly a name to keep an eye on, that we're watching pretty closely, see what happens with him. Alabama likes him a lot. Alabama does have some really good linebacker commitments, but they're still trying to get some inside guys on board. So, they're probably going to. I would probably assume they're going to take 2 more inside linebackers in this class. We'll see how the numbers shape out in the end, but we know about some of the other top targets like Nakobe Dean that's still out there. So Alabama is still trying to get some inside linebacker help. Christian Harris certainly a top guy to consider. I'm going to take a couple questions right now because we got a lot of people chiming in. Do I like Jalen or Tua better? I'm not going to talk about the quarterback situation. I'll let Kyle and Tony talk about that. I like both the kids. They're both great competitors, and whoever wins the job is going to win the job. Hill commitment, and that's one kid that I wanted to talk about. Dax Hill, the number 1 safety in the country out of Oklahoma. There's been a lot of back and forth right now with him. It seems like every single day somebody has a new lead on him that it's either Alabama or Michigan, and people keep changing their prediction on him every single day. And I said on our board, just let him do his thing. Both those schools seem like they're in pretty good position with him. It seems like it's going to come down to those 2 schools. I don't think he's made a decision. Now, he did take an official visit to Alabama back in June, came off that trip very high on the Crimson Tide. But he also really likes Michigan a lot. Now, we saw him cancel a visit to Oklahoma this past weekend. So I think Oklahoma's out, and I think that's pretty clear indication. But it's going to be between Alabama and Michigan, in my opinion. A decision could come here pretty soon, so we'll keep a close eye on it. But yeah, I'm not ready to say one school is leading over the other. And I know so many predictions come in, and people say, oh, well, this many predictions have come in on Alabama, and this many predictions have come in on Michigan. So it must mean that Alabama is in the lead, since 20 predictions are on Alabama and only 17 are on Michigan. I don't pay attention to that crap too much. I just know that Alabama, Michigan, 2 very top schools on his list, and he's going to make a decision here pretty soon. So we'll see what he decides to do. I don't think he's informed either coaching staff of his decision. So he's got to wait and see what happens. Another kid we want to talk about that just recently made a decision. A lot of people have asked me about him. And there's been some mixed things regarding him. Jeffrey Carter. 4-star defensive back out of Texas. It's funny how people say, if someone commits elsewhere, it must have meant that they didn't have a committable offer, that there was no room for him. He needed to go elsewhere. A lot of that stuff's just crap. That's the bottom line there. A lot of that stuff's just not true. Sometimes it is. I mean, there's many times where I see this prospect chose this school over Alabama, and we've never even mentioned this kid on the BamaInsider.com board. Not once. And we saw that a couple of weeks ago with some kids. And I'm not saying some of these kids didn't have offers. It's just they never really considered Alabama. So not sure why people like to say this kid chose X school over Alabama. It's just, kind of silly in my opinion. But, with Jeffrey Carter, certainly a kid that Alabama heavily recruited thought at one time they were going to get. And if he wanted to announce a commitment to Alabama the other day, Alabama would have certainly accepted his commitment, because it's kind of an interesting year in terms of defensive back wise. Alabama really wants to get some really good safeties, and they have a really good safety class, and some guys who can move around in that secondary. Cornerback's not really a top priority, but they would still like to get one. And Jeffrey Carter was one of those guys that they really liked a lot, that they would have accepted a commitment from. Now, there's some other guys that are still out there that they like. Akeem Dent from Florida, that's committed to Florida State from Plantation High School. Now, Alabama's trying to get him on campus for a visit. And I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, there's a good chance that he flips from Florida State to Alabama. Kid has to visit Alabama first. So quit saying there's a good chance he's going to flip, because kid needs to visit. Now, he's visited in the past, but he hasn't visited, since last football season. So until he does, I wouldn't consider Alabama much of a chance to flip him. Another kid that I think Alabama has a good chance with, though, Noah Pola Gates, 4-star defensive back out of Arizona, has visited Alabama a few times this year. Was in earlier in the year, and then spent 4 days in Tuscaloosa in June. So I think Alabama has the best chance to get his commitment. He wants to wait a little while. Said recently he's going to wait until January to decide. But if Alabama pushes for him, I can see him deciding a little bit sooner than that. So we'll keep a close eye on him, see what happens with him, possibly a decision within the next few months. Another kid that we just recently saw make a commitment, Ryan Davis, 4-star, or I guess top 100 linebacker out of Apopka High School, Waukegan High School down in Apopka, Florida. We saw him commit to Georgia just the other day. Not really surprised. Has been favoring Georgia for a very long time. He did visit Alabama last month, and we knew that he really liked Alabama, because I got a chance to talk to him, a few days after that visit down to Tuscaloosa. Said that Alabama was very high on his list. He wanted to get back a few more times, but went ahead and made a decision for Georgia the other day. We got a chance to speak to him, and he said that he's still going to visit Alabama in the fall. So, who knows what may happen there. I think he'll stick with Georgia regardless if he visits Alabama, just because they've been leading for such a long time. And Alabama's still got some other linebackers that they're still going after. Obviously Nakobe Dean being at the top of the list. And, there's some other guys that are out there that I think they've got a good chance with. So we'll see, kind of what happens with him over the course of the next few months. Just had this come in. Trey Sanders, things are heating up with Trey Sanders. Well, things have been heating up with Trey Sanders. I mean, things have been going extremely well. If you would have asked me, and I mentioned this probably a week ago, if you would have asked me 6 months ago, did I expect Trey Sanders to come back into Alabama's class? Even though he was naming Alabama as his favorite, I would have been kind of shocked, just because once we see kids decommit, we never really see them come back. I mean, there's some instances where we see it. We saw it with Xavier McKinney 2 years ago. He decommitted, and a lot of people thought he was going to end up at Clemson, and ended up back at Alabama. Same thing with Shaheem Carter. Shaheem Carter decommitted from Alabama. A lot of people thought he was going to end up at LSU or Ole Miss, and ended up back at Alabama. So it does happen, but we see a lot of kids who decommit and end up elsewhere. Brendan Gant decommitted. Now, I don't know if Alabama really went back after him, but we saw him end up committing to Florida State this past weekend. But Trey Sanders, I think Alabama's in great shape with him. He was supposed to visit Tuscaloosa this past weekend for the cookout, but IMG kind of shut it down in terms of not letting any of their kids take visits this past weekend. A lot of people said, oh, well, why are they shutting kids away from visiting Alabama? They shut kids away from visiting anywhere. They didn't, kids weren't going to Florida State. They weren't going to Georgia. They weren't going to Miami. They weren't going anywhere. So it wasn't some conspiracy against, kids going to Alabama this past weekend. It was just a rule that their high school set, and that's kind of it right there. But Trey Sanders wouldn't surprise me if he committed today or if he committed in December. I mean, he could announce a decision at any point. And even though his brother's at Florida, I really like Alabama's chances here. Alabama does have a pretty good running back commitment in Darion Robinson, but kind of a change of pace type guy. He's a kind of a scat back. You can do a lot of different things with him. Reminds me a lot of Josh Jacobs. So, but I think Alabama's in great shape with Trey Sanders. I think I'm pretty sure he'll jump on board with the Crimson Tide at some point over the course of the next few months. Does Robbie Ashford have a Bama offer? Robbie Ashford, quarterback at a Hoover High School. I think Alabama wants to watch him a little bit more. He's been injured. We saw him injured last year, and also saw him injured during baseball season this year. And this football season is going to give him an opportunity to really showcase himself. And I know he wants to play quarterback in college, but could he possibly play another position? Really good athlete. I've known about Robbie for a very long time. So, I think he's got a chance to be a really, really good football player. Of course, Alabama has a quarterback commitment in the 2020 class, Carson Beck out of Jacksonville, Florida. Alabama's, as of right now, not really planning on taking another quarterback in 2020. Carson Beck might be the only quarterback since Alabama does have 2 quarterback commitments in this 2019 class. Quarterback really won't be a top priority in 2020. So we'll see what happens, and possibly if he ends up maybe playing another position at the next level. Next question that came in: does Bama have a shot at Kayvon Thibodeau? Absolutely. Kayvon is, lives in California, has made 2 trips to Tuscaloosa this year. So the Alabama very high on his list. Has a great relationship with the coaching staff. Got a great relationship with Tosh Lapoy and the rest of the coaches. So I think Alabama has an excellent shot with him. I'm not sure when he'll make a decision. He hasn't really said when he's going to decide, but looks like he's going to take some official visits before making that decision. If I had to throw in a top 2 for him, I think he's going to end up in the Southeast, and I think he's going to end up at Alabama or Florida State. I don't think he stays on the West Coast. Ishmael Sopsher, 5-star defensive lineman. What's going to happen with him? Well, we saw him release a top 7 the other day. I guess it was last night when he released that top 7. Not really surprised with some of the schools that were on the list. And off the top of my head, I can't think of all of them, but I know that Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, I know they all made the cut. I think Oregon was on there as well. I know 2 other schools, so I can't remember. But obviously, most people are going to assume it's going to be between Alabama, LSU. A&M's in there a little bit, but I think he ends up choosing between Alabama and LSU in the end. We'll see what happens. There's people every day who think that he's leaning towards Alabama, and we have different posters on our site that keep saying that he's going to Alabama, and some people down in Louisiana are starting to feel that way as well. I'm probably not there yet in terms of thinking he's going to Alabama. I'm still leaning towards LSU, but we'll see what happens. He needs to get back to Tuscaloosa, for Alabama to have a chance, I believe, or not a chance, but a really good chance to sign him, because they definitely have a chance. But no visits to Tuscaloosa this summer. I think that's big. And he's made some trips down to Baton Rouge and visited the Tigers, but no trips to Alabama this summer. So you always kind of question that a little bit. But you never know what may have happened. It could be a travel issue. We'll see some kids in Tuscaloosa this fall. Some kids make it for official visits that weren't able to visit Alabama this summer for travel reasons. One particular kid, Ty Robinson, out of Arizona, big defensive lineman, defensive end, about 6'5", 260 pounds. Wanted to visit Alabama all summer, just couldn't get the travel worked out. So we'll see him in Tuscaloosa for an official visit down the road, and that's going to be the case with a lot of kids. Keem Dent, as I mentioned in the show earlier, the 5-star defensive back out of Florida. We'll see him make a trip to Alabama at some point, either during the season or after the season. Let's see. Who do you think Alabama will finish with on the offensive line? Um, it's hard to say. Alabama has three really good offensive linemen right now that they really like a lot. With Pierce Quick, Maury Kite, both guys who were in the Rivals 100, and then Tanner Bowles, kind of a utility offensive lineman who can pretty much play any position on the offensive line you put him. I know Alabama really likes him a lot, but fact is, there's still some really good offensive linemen who are out there. Darnell Wright, who was on campus this past weekend. I think Alabama's got an excellent shot with him. Clay Webb, the number one player in the state of Alabama right now, five-star center out of Oxford, Alabama. He visited Clemson in Georgia this past weekend. And, seems to be a lot of buzz around Georgia right now. But I still think Alabama's in good shape with Clay. And, he's not expected to announce the decision until down the road. So we'll keep an eye on him. Evan Neal, we started talking about him a lot more on the Bama Insider board. Big kid who was once committed to Alabama, visited Tuscaloosa back in June, and has become a major target for Alabama. So yeah, that's certainly a kid that I think Alabama's got a great shot to get a commitment from. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Darion Downcourt, a new name, but somebody that Alabama likes a lot, and Alabama wants to get a true center. And I say true center. They want to get a kid who's going to play center. Darion Downcourt, kind of moves around on the offensive line. He likes guard. He likes center, but said that he's fine with playing either position. So I think Alabama really likes him. So those are really the names to kind of keep an eye on the offensive line, and I guess Kumar Bell as well, in case they end up losing a guy or two. They could easily extend an offer to Kumar Bell. So those are some big names right there, and Alabama obviously could end up with a great offensive line class down the road, but possibly the best offensive line class in the Nick Saban tenure at Alabama. Let's see. I'll take it to another question here. If we miss on Dean, who are the remaining inside linebacker targets? There's a lot of inside linebacker targets that are out there. We keep mentioning these guys on the Bama Insider board, so I encourage you to get on the Alabama Insider or the Bama Insider.com recruiting board, because we're talking about these kids every single day. There's a lot of top guys that are still out there. And even though Ryan Davis just recently committed to Georgia, I still think Alabama is going to continue to recruit him. Another kid who's committed to Georgia, Tresman Marshall. I think he's still going to take some visits in the fall. He's still staying in contact with Alabama. So that's another name to keep an eye on, just in terms of visiting. I'm not saying he's going to flip or anything like that. I just think that he's still communicating with Alabama, still going to take some visits, including one back to Tuscaloosa. Nakobe Dean, obviously, very high on Alabama's wish list. They'd really like to get him on board. Henry Odetola out of California. Daniel Himula, also out of California. Two guys that they really like a lot. And Muhammad Diabate out of Auburn High School, still heavily recruited by Alabama. So still a lot of guys that are out there that are heavily recruited. As I mentioned, Alabama would like to get two more inside linebackers if they can. They're not just going to take two more inside linebackers. If they can get guys that they really like, that they really want, we'll see what happens. But yeah, those are kind of the main guys right now that they're going after, and we'll kind of wait and see who ends up visiting, and maybe who even including in the fall and also after the season for official visits. So things can change, and obviously there's some new names who could easily pop up. We see that every single year. New names pop up, not necessarily because Alabama lost on somebody, but maybe because they didn't really emerge until their senior season, have a great year, and so we see that every single year. New names start to emerge. We saw that last year with Eddie Smith, who became a big target for Alabama over even some five-star defensive backs. So Alabama was really excited to get Eddie Smith on board, and we could see a similar situation with maybe a linebacker or two who emerge this football season. Let's see. We need more linebackers and safeties and defensive line. I think we all know that. I think a lot of people have been keeping a pretty close eye on what's been going on. Am I single? No. I'm not single, Whitney. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I know you've been been waiting on me to tell you that, so I'm sorry. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all we're going to talk about today. I just want to do a quick little recap of the weekend. What all happened down in Tuscaloosa for the Champions Cookout. Kind of give you an update of what's all been going on with even some of these other schools that have been getting some commitments. Obviously, some of these other programs like Texas A&M, Georgia have been really hot on the recruiting trail. Oklahoma. These programs are going to stay hot, and Alabama's going to have to keep up. And I know a lot of Alabama fans are wanting to know who's the next commitment. And I think you have to kind of keep an eye on Dax Hill, number one safety in the country out of Oklahoma, Trey Sanders, number one running back in the country. Those would probably be the two guys, at least in terms of next commitments. And I'm not saying they're committing to Alabama, and just in terms of Alabama targets who are probably going to announce their decisions next. And most of these other guys are going to wait until later in the fall, maybe even after the season to decide. So keep it tuned to BamaInsider.com. We're breaking it down every single day, and there's new information that comes every single day. And we're always posting that information on the recruiting board, letting everybody know if this kid has moved down the board, or if this kid has moved up. Just like all the BamaInsider.com subscribers were able to find out about kids like Jaquez Sorrells, Darion Downcourt, kids who made it to Tuscaloosa this weekend. But probably when Alabama fans probably first saw those names as visitors, they probably didn't give much thought to them because we haven't talked about them a ton on the message boards. But now we are talking about them. Now these kids are top targets for Alabama. So keep a very close eye on the Bama Insider board. Kyle and Tony do such a great job covering the team, and they've got a lot of stuff coming for the start of fall practice. So be sure to follow them. And I'm going to get out of here, and we'll see you guys next time.